What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. This is TWA Motorsports, and today we are doing the first modification to the new B4C Camaro, the one I just purchased. And what we are going to be addressing is the taillights. Now, as I talked about in the last video, this was busted out. It's not even busted, it just fell out, and he really didn't know what happened. But as you can see, there's cracks and moisture inside of these, and well, I just want to replace them. Now, there are some other things that have actually popped up since I did that video that really need to be fixed, but because I already have the taillights, I'm going to go ahead and replace those today. So we are going to be replacing them with the LT1 style, and the reason I'm going with this, I actually found these used. There's not a lot of good aftermarket options out there. They just look really, dare I say, ricey, and I just don't like that look. So we are going to replace them with the LT1 style. Now, there are a little bit of differences in the plugs, the way they light up, and we will be addressing that. So the very first thing we're going to have to do is obviously get these old taillights out of the way. And as you can see, I haven't even cleaned out the parts that this guy, he bypassed the cooler for the power steering. I haven't even taken any of this stuff out, and I need to because it's a greasy mess. But we're going to go ahead and start by popping these panels off. We got to have these out of the way in order to get this back enough to reach in and get the tail lights out. Now, once I have those two panels out of the way, I push this carpet back, and there's actually only two pieces that hold this on. They're just kind of like a wing nut, one here, one inside. And as you can see, there's a bunch of random wiring because, like I said, this was a cop car, so there was some tapping into some wiring, it looks like. And on the other side, you are able to get to that with the spare tire in. It's just kind of a tight reach. There is another one on that side and this one, so we're going to get those out, and then the taillights will be out of the way. Well, I don't know if you guys saw that, but do you see all the water that came out of this when oh, there's still some coming out. It's crazy. Anyway, let's go get this other one out. Okay, remember when I said you could get this out without having that out of the way? Well, my hands are too big, so I can't do that. I'm going to go ahead and take the spare tire out, which looks like, surprisingly, it's never touched the ground. And all you have to do is spin that centerpiece off. There's a hook that you take out, and then the spare tire will come out of place. So now that we have the taillights out of the way, one of the common issues is that the plugs do not fit. Now, the 194 plug that's just this corner light does, but none of these other ones fit into place. So a lot of times what people will do is they will either trim on the housing or they will trim on the actual socket itself in order to reuse this. So I'm not going to do that. I've decided that if I ever want to go back to stock, I don't want to have these leak. Chances are I probably won't, but what I did was I went to the salvage yard and I got a new harness off of a 93 to 96. So that's what we're going to be doing. Now, in order to replace the harness, you are going to have to take off the plate here on the back, this panel, and that's just a couple 10 millimeters on the inside. We're going to get it out of the way, and then the plug for this entire harness is just right here. So we can literally unplug one and plug the other one in. So that's what we're going to do next, is we're going to take that panel off, get that old harness out of the way, put the new harness in. Now, once we have all of the, or that panel out of the way, we can go down here, and this is actually the plug for the taillight harness, and we can unplug it. It goes through the back of the car through this rubber grommet here. So we're going to take that out, and then obviously we have a couple clips that are holding the wiring harness in place. And this clip here goes down to your tail or your license plate lights. So we're going to unplug it. The new one comes with it. Not sure if the plug will match up. It probably will, but let's get this out of the way and start routing this harness back. Now there's a ton of dirt and just grossness back here, so I'm going to clean this up before I put the new harness back in and before I put that panel back into place. If you guys notice on these cars when you wash them, and in this car, this paint is wrecked, so don't get me wrong, it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to be perfect, but I want to at least get some of that dirt out, because when you wash these cars, dirt gets in there and then runs out on your back bumper, and it always makes it look like trash. But like I said, this paint's not perfect. It's just kind of one of those things that I want to do while I've got it apart. All right, well, I got this cleaned up a little bit, and it looks a little better. I didn't spend a ton of time on it, but now we're going to route the new harness back into place. Same method, obviously, as the way you came out. There was a ground in here that I didn't talk about that grounds up here against the latch. But, everything looks to be the same. The plugs line up. So I think this will work. We're going to be trying it together, essentially, because I've never done this. So I've switched these taillights in the past, but I've never actually, I don't think I've ever actually hooked up LT1 taillights. I mean, I've had taillights out before, but I don't think I've ever hooked up LT1 taillights. So obviously the shorter side's going to go over here, longer side's going to go over here, and we'll route this into place. And I'm going to go ahead and put the tail lights in and test them. I did buy all new bulbs for them. The difference, though, these are a different kind of bulb. The old style are a push-in, and some of them don't actually have a push-in, but mine happen to be the push-in. These are the old style metal turn-ins, and so I did buy all new bulbs, and I'll list those part numbers in the description below. But let's plug it all up and see if it works. Now, one other thing I always like to use, especially in these old style screw-in type bulbs, let me show you here, like these, is I like to use a little bit of dielectric grease. You don't have to use a ton, but always a good idea. It kind of keeps moisture out of there. And you know, this is one of those things I used to never use, but I've had a couple that have rusted into place, and that helps with that as well. So let's get these bulbs installed. We'll put the lights into place. Like I said, I'm not going to put the panel in yet because we're going to test them before we put it all back together. Well, I don't know if you guys noticed, but when I got everything plugged in, I didn't have enough slack, so I probably should have waited to put those this wire loom back into place until I got everything mounted. But oh well, we've got it back out now. We're going to go ahead and plug these back in, like I said, and hopefully test it, make sure everything works. The last two things we need to hook up are just this plug, which it is the same. I did cut that off the salvage yard just in case it wasn't. And then we need to put our ground back where it goes. Okay guys, well, we plugged it in and we got some issues, and it is not plug and play like I thought it might be, even though the plugs are the same. I was noticing when I took this plug apart, it had a blue plug on the factory piece, and it does not have that here. So what we're going to have to do is, the reverse lights work, the park lights work, the right turn signal works, the left turn signal does not. Turns out the left turn signal is fed off that blue wire, which you can see coming in right here on the top. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to run another blue wire. Now, one other thing that doesn't work is the brake lights don't work. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two separate harnesses and I'm going to patch them together. I can go and get another one of these harnesses down the road if I ever decide to go back to the other taillights, which I don't think that I'm going to. You know, I originally stated that if I wanted to go back, I could just unplug it. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut off these plugs off of this harness, and I'm going to solder them onto my new harness. I think that's going to be the easiest route. So we're going to put the old harness back in the car, back into place, and we're just going to go through each one individually, cut them off, and put them into place. So I'm going to first start with the reverse light. It's just the easiest one, and then we're going to kind of work our way through. But I'm going to cut this plug off, obviously, of this one, and we're going to solder it onto this piece. Now probably what I'll do is I'm just going to tape these up a little bit, and once we make sure that it works, then we'll go back and solder all the connections. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to be taking these out individually, clipping them off on both harnesses, and at least twisting them together for now, probably putting a little tape just so they don't ground out. Now the cool thing is we don't have to do the 194 bulb, which is out here in the corner, because it's the same size. The only plugs that are different are just these three. Now the other cool thing here is that a majority of the colors are the same, so that makes it pretty simple as far as like knowing what goes where. I mean, I know where the reverse lights are, so obviously I know which one to cut off there, but like I said, we're just going to work our way through this, cutting each plug off, soldering them on the new connection. I know this is a lot of work, but the downside when you go to trim the housing is it could potentially leak, and I'm sure you guys have seen that in the past, and old bulbs or bulbs get water in the housing, and you can never get it right after that. So that's why I'm doing this. You can, to me, this is the cheapest option. You can buy each one of these plugs individually and do this, but they're about, I don't know, $8 a piece. And I bought this entire harness for $10 at a salvage yard, so not really worth, you know, buying new plugs in my opinion. So the very first ones I started with are the reverse bulbs, and they are lighting up, so we are good to go ahead and solder those. That'll be one less thing I have to solder when I get all finished up, so that's a good sign. Now I will say it looks like I may have a weak ground somewhere, because this is barely lighting up on this side and it shouldn't be, but that's not a big deal. We'll address that. I'm pretty sure that's just a ground issue. This car, because it's a cop car, there's been a ton of splicing into the grounds in the back, so I'm going to redo the ground that pushes through the actual grommet here. It's got a ton of jumpers off of it for other grounds, so I'm going to redo that, and I think that'll address that issue. But we know that the reverse lights work, so let's go ahead and solder those, and then we'll move on to the actual brake lights and turn signals. So I have been splicing the new harness together, and I know that you guys probably know this, but when you go to a LT1 style taillight, they're a little bit different. So on the old style headlight or taillight, you have obviously a separate turn indicator, and then you have your brake light, your outer light, and then your reverse light. So the reverse light's pretty simple, it's the same. Okay, so no big issue there. I went ahead, cut it, I put it in reverse, tested it, everything worked, so I soldered it up and taped it up, so we are good. Now, moving on to the outer light, like I said, we didn't have to mess with that because it actually fits. It's just a simple 194 bulb. The next issue though is because the LT1 tail light, and let me grab it so you can see side by side. So when you hit or when you turn your lights on, so your tail lights at nighttime, the only thing that's going to light up is this guy right here. Now that's fine if you want to just use this as a turn indicator, but I wanted it to light up at night, not necessarily for braking, but I just wanted it to be lit up just like this one was. So what I've done is I got another, basically what I did was I trimmed off a clip, like I said I didn't want to do, but all I had to do was trim just that much, and it sets back in the LT1 housing. So I didn't have to trim on the housing. I didn't want to trim on the housing, that was the whole issue. So this one right here, I just took a razor blade and cut the end of this off, and it fits just as snug as all of these other ones. So and the reason I did that is because this has 3 plugs. The 2 outer run the turn signal. So you can see I've got them fed into that, and then I have a jumper wire from the center of this to the actual brake light. So what will happen now is when we turn the lights on at night, all the lights will light up. This will be our brake, this will be our turn signal. So there's a couple different ways you could wire it. I'm sure that we could go through and make the turn signal work on both of them, but I'm not going to mess with that. What I'm going to do is just finish it up like this. So we have all our connections made. For the most part, the colors are the same. We're going blue to green on that LT1 style harness. It's a green wire, and the blue wire comes out of the LS harness. Same thing over here, green to blue. But it's kind of one of those things that you can just test and decide what you want. I'm completely happy with just the outer lighting up for the brake light, and the inner just being lit as a tail, and then also being your turn signal. So it's kind of one of those things you want to test and go back and forth. And this is something I think there's a write-up on LS1 Tech about adding a jumper wire and then just using your factory harness. And you probably could, but it just looked like on a couple of these plugs I was unable to use the factory harness. So I think the harness from the LT1 car is a good idea. That way you have those plugs, and then if need be you can get an additional one. Like I said, I didn't have to. I was able to use this LS one just by cutting that piece off. But we're going to solder this all back together, duplicate it on the other side, and we will be set. All right, so I've got this light into place. This one's all finished up, and I'm going to show you guys kind of the functionality of it. Like I said before, if you don't hook this up, it's going to be completely dark when the headlights are on, and the only time it'll light up is if you have your turn signal on. And I wanted it to light up with the park lights. So I'm going to go turn them on, and you guys will be able to see the difference. All right, so as you can see, everything is working properly. Now all we have to do is go to the other side, finish it up, then we'll be able to take this all back out, put the panel back in, and we should be finished. All right, guys, well, I think we actually have it finished now. So as you can see, the brake lights are lit up, and well, I think we're good. So now I just need to put that panel back in place and put the taillights back in once I get the panel in, and I'll go ahead and set that wire into place, and we should be finished up. If you guys noticed when I was putting this on, these actually route on the outside. I had them routed on here, and it wasn't letting that set flat, so they do come to the outside. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean out those buckets. I probably should have done it before I put the panel on, but oh well. And then we'll get the taillights back into place. Well, guys, as you can see, we are all finished up. The plate rear cover here is back into place. The taillights are in, and I think they look a ton better. Obviously, if you guys watched the last video, you knew that this fell out, and this one is cracked, so it wasn't far behind. Normally, I wouldn't set those on the paint, but you also, if you watch that video, know that this paint is wrecked, so it does not matter. It is also, as you can see that thing rocking, it is the windiest day I think I've worked outside in quite a while, but at least it's kind of warm. And well, we got it all accomplished. It wasn't quite as easy as I thought it would be. I was hoping that I could just plug the old harness in and everything would work, but we did have to splice some pieces in, and I do like the fact that I'm not trimming off each one of those. The one that I did trim off still fit. I didn't have to trim on the housing, I just had to trim on the plug. So you might be able to get away with that on the factory harness, but I did cut off a majority, well, two of these plugs, the reverse plug and I think the turn signal plug I cut off of the the harness that I got at the salvage yard. So those are pretty easy to source. I think I paid $10 for it, and there's a ton of them out there. Any from 93 to 96 would have that old style, but unfortunately it's not plug and play. So, but we did get it in. I like these for a couple reasons, guys. The old ones have orange in them, and I don't like, there's 3 colors, and I just think that's too many colors. If you watched any of my GMC videos, my older GMCs, I took the orange markers out and put Chevrolet ones in because I didn't like the orange in it. The other thing is this flows really well with the body line. That one has no flow whatsoever, but this one looks really nice. It kind of matches that curvature of the trunk, and well, I just think it looks a lot better. But ultimately this is a pretty easy swap, guys. You do have to solder a couple connections. If you're lucky and you want to trim off the plugs or modify your housings, you wouldn't even have to do that. But I will list everything, like I said, in the descriptions down below, so you guys can go get that stuff. You can buy those plugs brand new if you just want to buy the plug. Might have been a cheaper option since I only had to use one of them, but they are like $8.99 a piece, which that kind of sucks. Anyway, if you like this video, guys, if you like this car, this content, smash that thumbs up button. If you're not subscribed, please go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there, make sure you ring that bell icon. That way you're notified every time we drop a new video. And well, stay tuned because obviously we have a ton of stuff to do on this as well as everything else.